IVM.
Hey guys, this is Chuck here, and before we dive into all the banter and bad jokes on this week's episode, I want to let you know about a new show I'm hosting. It's called One Rep at a Time. It's got me talking about the various aspects of fitness and health, like nutrition, exercise, stress, sleep. It's a show geared towards those who are looking to kickstart their fitness journey. I drop in lots of trivia, give you my own experiences and mistakes, lots of tips, speak to a lot of experts. So if you're looking to start a fitness journey, this is the show for you. Check out One Rep at a Time on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. All right, on with the show. Hello and welcome to Simblified. This is Chuck starting off this week's episode, and this is actually the first part of a very special two-part episode that we're doing, where we are interviewing one of our own. I've always wanted to do an episode where Naren just narrates stories. Not necessarily just jumping from one story randomly to the other, but some theme sort of tying it together. And I had this idea of doing an episode centered around the city of Mumbai, a city that I once used to loathe and now have grown to love for many, many reasons, many of which we will list out in the episode. So, I mean, this was a completely unscripted episode and one of the nicest, warmest episodes I think we've done. And we had a few themes to begin with. And Naren just started off telling us about stories, insights, and it moves from the funny to the deeply poignant to, some tragedy to some complete comedy. I mean, there's just so much in these two episodes. And to me, it genuinely just felt like the four of us hanging out and having, a conversation over beer or something like that. So I, completely enjoyed it. The conversation ended up being so long so that we've actually decided to split it up across two episodes because 1.5 hours, might be a little too much Naren for all of us. So what we're hearing this week is part one of the two-part episode. So let's jump right into it. And it starts off on a very random note of we go then. Part one of Naren Stories. Welcome to Simplified. We break down the world around us while coming together. Coming together more in the style of the Beatles, actually.
Wow.
Anyway, we explain the world around us while not being plain, without too much pain, which you can hear either in a car or a
Train.
plane. And your plane can either be aero or Cartesian, depending on your geometrical inclinations. And in this,
And we also have to coordinate with each other.
Wow.
Well done.
Nice. That one wasn't scripted. Okay.
No.
And in this real estate construction, we four men will act as the four men building knowledge and wisdom that is simplified. I think we should stop scripting the intros. I should start.
I think we've reached the point where Chuck himself has transformed into a WhatsApp forward.
Wonderful. So anyway, I am Chuck, the co-founder of Simplified. If you can say that. We are all co-founders. Naren and I are the co-founders, and you're the guys who join 4 years later and get that co-founder title.
I am first employee with maximum number of ESOPs.
I am Elon Musk and I've just bought over Simplified.
So when you said free speech, you just wanted to free the speech. Like go, like never come back here again. Nice.
Set the speech free. Let it fly away.
Let it fly. If you love someone, speech it free. That made no sense. I don't know why you guys are laughing. Okay, don't encourage us.
I'm speechless. That made no sense. Also could be a tagline for Simplified.
So for our new listeners, there are 4 co-hosts and we are here again today to record yet another episode. You heard Chuck doing the intro. This is me, Tony. And we also have...
Hi, I'm Srikeit. As mentioned, I am not the co-founder of Simplified. However, I was shanghaied into this endeavor. So the hosts could take a break and take vacations and shit.
Interesting. What is that word you use? Shanghaied. Please explain.
Shanghaied is
a famous...
It's a very pretty common this thing. Shanghai, I mean, they just someone brought someone in. So it's actually a phrase which was pre-Bangalore. So the phrase is also Bangalore, but pre that is Shanghai is where a job has gone overseas and like they've gotten someone from the other markets and brought them in.
Shanghai is where they physically catch you and take you.
That aspect. Yeah,
it appears in Catch 22, the most brilliant novel of all time.
Anyway, moving from one megalopolis to the other, today we are going to be talking not about Shanghai, but about
Shanghai is a term that is old, but you would have heard the term Ukraine used on The Seen and the Unseen.
Yes.
And that was contributed by none other than our fourth co-host, Naren. You should introduce
what does Ukraine mean?
Yeah, Ukraine means basically somebody had sex with you. Yeah, so that's when you're not. That's yeah.
Okay.
Holy crap.
That's a fairly cave observation.
We're off to check so much for scripting your intro. Oh man.
No. From now on, we should do only blue Zelensky thinking.
Yeah, man.
Naren puts the PG in PG Wodehouse and also in parental guidance.
Yeah.
So if you were listening to this podcast, thinking it is...
Naren, Chuck, from next time, let's not bother with scripting because, then we have plausible deniability that we weren't scripted. What is your excuse?
What is your excuse? Yeah, we were not scripted.
Anyway, speaking about things that are not scripted, today we are going to talk about the lovely city of Mumbai. And
for once, which all four of us are in together.
Oh yeah, correct. And but still, we steadfastly remain loyal to recording remotely.
Yes,
Srikeit being the only person in the studio, which is why his voice is boomier and nicer, and dare I say, sexier today.
Sure. I'm holding down a burp at this point.
Yeah, sure. So what I wanted to do today was, I always wanted to do a simplified episode full of Naren's anecdotes. And I thought what better context to give than, say, an entire show about Mumbai. The inspiration for this was when Naren and I went to his factory or something close to his factory in Vasai, and he regaled me with tales along the way. And I had to stop myself from saying, save it for the podcast, save it for the podcast. So here is that podcast episode. So we thought we'd talk about the history of Bombay as seen through Naren's eyes.
Yeah.
So Naren, you are going to be our historian, comedian, guide, philosopher, and
starting when you were born in 1720.
I know.
When did you come to Bombay first, or you were born here?
First of all, I have to say, like other people who bear my name, I'm hopelessly inadequate for the task assigned.
So that's a damning blow to all Shenois. This is.
Oh man! No, we really need to begin on one corner of the earth. The United States was being formed by the Declaration of Independence, and on the other side of the earth, there was a Narendra Shenoy who was just getting into his job.
Oh, you have upgraded him from Pangea, I see. Naren, jokes apart, Bombay, your first memory or your first whatever smell?
So, Bombay has always been my city, and it's like frog in boiling water. You really don't realize how things change, though it's not really that bad. Bombay has grown a lot, and when I was growing up, it was. So first of all, a little background, right? So my dad was a doctor and my grandfather used to live in Wadala. My dad wanted to start a practice, but Wadala was quite crowded with medical practitioners there. So he hunted around and somebody suggested Malad. And at that time, my father tells me that there are exactly two people who would get down at Malad station, that himself and his good friend, Mr. Madhyar. And they became good friends on the train. And he told my dad that, if you want to set up a medical practice, and, back in the day, home visits were a thing. So everyone wanted to go to a doctor who was stayed somewhere close by. So if you were to relocate from Wadala to here. So my father moved with my mom. Me and I have two younger sisters. My first sister was also born. The younger one wasn't. And I must have been 2 years or so. My sister would be just born, few months old. And we come to this little house. My father doesn't have much money, so he pays. In those days, these were what were called pagdi flats. So pagdi is the signing amount you pay for tenancy rights in a place. And then you pay the rent forever. So you're technically not the owner, but because it's rent controlled, you can stay there.
Sorry, one aside there, interesting etymology for the word pagdi itself, which is basically comes from the aspect of pagdi, which is your turban, which is the sign of respect, right?
Yeah.
So it's basically you're giving your honor. You're kind of like pledging your honor that you will pay rent in the future.
Wow. And one aside from me also. So when Naren's dad came to uninhabited suburb, he said Allah. And since he was a doctor, he added the M and D on both sides. That's how Mallad, the name came about. Please, Naren, carry on.
That's pretty close to the truth, actually. So,
go on, sorry, Naren. Yes, please continue.
Yeah. And so we move on to this house. And my mother is from Mangalore, so she doesn't speak much. She speaks some broken Hindi, and now she speaks fluent Marathi as well. But back in the day, she couldn't. And she settles in. My dad goes off to work, and the neighbors come in and they say that, why did you buy this flat? So what do you mean, why did you buy this flat? He says, the guy before you, he went bankrupt. He just went bust and he had to go. You know why he went bust? Why? So there was one husband and wife who lived before this, and he ill-treated his wife. So she committed suicide in this very house. So it's very bad. And everyone was like, my mom was in tears when my father came back in the evening from work. She said, we have to find a new house. He says, honey, I'm broke. There's no way. We'll have to. And it turned out to be a really nice place. We did well. My father prospered. He started a hospital. We got the house that I live now is very large. So he built that one. And all of us spent a really happy time. And it was a very different. So we lived in a proper flat, but there were a lot of chawls around. So chawls are, they're basically the living quarters, but the loo is outside. So it's basically a little less. It was a very Bombay thing. So people would come. They had absolutely no intentions of settling down in Bombay. They would come just to earn money. And lots of them preferred to live in a chawl because the rents were really low. And that was a way. So I had a lot of friends, and life in a chawl was like amazing, vibrant. So just behind our house, there was a Gujarati chawl. So everyone, and I couldn't really speak Gujaratis, but I had a couple of good friends there.
Yeah, so sorry on the chawl thing. I just wanted to add some things wherever.
I'm just rambling. I've got no thread to my story. Yeah.
On that, I just watched this Kaun Praveen Tambe. There is a movie that's out on, I think, something which is about Praveen Tambe, who's that guy who played made his IPL debut and any kind of first class debut in his 40s and stuff. And that entire movie is around like his life and how he kind of does it. And so he grew up in a chawl. He lived in a chawl for all his life. And that movie and a couple of other movies also kind of like talk about how a lot of Bombay's culture as such in the middle of the 20th century was kind of like born in this chawl culture, right? Like where people, it was almost like communal living.
Yeah.
Very communal. Yeah.
It's the closest you can get to a village environment inside an urban center, right? Where there were all these kids were pretty much raised by the whole chawl in some way. Like kids would all play together. People would all be invested in each other's life. There would be a lot of gossip, obviously, but there's also like a lot of communal living, so to speak. So the Bombay chawl culture in some way, while yes, I mean, chawls have a bad name in some way because they also show like not having enough financial means, but it's still something that's actually quite celebrated through a lot of culture as well.
Yeah. I'll tell you a thing about, so I had a friend named Pankaj who lived in the chawl behind our house. And like we used to just hang around. It's one of those childhood friendships. And like after we moved away from that place, I haven't seen him. I have no clue. I don't even know his surname. I just knew him as Pankaj. So this is what happened. Pankaj and bunch of us, we used to play and everything. One day, Pankaj had one or two siblings younger than him, and they lived in a small house. His father died one day, just dropped dead. Okay. And I mean, mother has no means of sustenance. And it turns out that Pankaj's father had some property back in the village. So they decide that, we should sell the property, get the money, and raise the children in Bombay so that they get an education, get a job. That's what everyone. And it takes forever to get sell the property and battle with the other relatives. And it's all those things. It took several years. The entire chawl contributed for their sort of living, living expenses. It was just incredible. I mean, I don't think, and it's not organized or anything like that. Everyone just decided that, you just stay here, study. And his mother used to do things. I mean, she used to cook and whatever. So it wasn't that she was but everyone chipped in. And I think they must have done well. I don't know where he went, but yeah. So those kind of things. So that was another story about Pankaj is that entire chawl actually. They used to have, it was very participative. So, and they were like, they used to go on picnics and we never used to go on. My father was very busy and, every available vacation, we used to just go off to my grandmother's house in Mangalore. So, and these guys used to go for picnics and things like that. And they would be very modest picnics. So I went on one of them. They went to a beach, I think Manori or somewhere. And like a bus load of people went, and it was very, a lot of people.
Is the bus hired or is it like one of the public buses? Is it
hired bus. Yeah, I don't remember, but I remember all of us going in a bus and singing songs and going and all that. That's pretty standard. What I really remember from that is everyone sits around and there is one elder of the tribe and he tells, so he's come with a program. And it is like we reached there at some 8 a.m. So he says 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. is nashta karwanu, which is do nashta. So everyone sits and does nashta. Then 9 to 10, he says samundarma ramwanu or whatever. That should go. Everyone goes in the beach place. Everyone is supposed to come back at 10. Then my favorite part, 10 to 11 is joke marwanu. So everyone...
And that's when they bring out Simblified on the...
Yeah. At 11 o'clock, you just stop mid-joke. Some sad sack is just telling a joke and there's no time's up and move on to the
time's
next
up.
thing.
Time's up. They don't enforce as a comedy store also.
Damn. Yeah, they don't even or like the Oscars where they play you off or anything.
Yeah. So this was the Gujarati way of doing things, highly regimented. Everything was, very sort of structured. And we guys, I mean, my family, and so I used to live in a very interesting building. Okay. So, we had a landlord and they were elderly people and they were very fond of my father. So every day, their name was Pandit. So old Mrs. Pandit would send one little bowl of fish curry with one piece of fish and give it to my mother and tell her that this is for your husband, Dr. Ansati. Wow. And every single day, my mother said, except for some Monday and Thursday or whatever, the days when they wouldn't eat. And that's another, very, very... And she forced my mother to speak Marathi. She said, she's refused to talk to my mother in any language other than Marathi. And over a period of time, my mother, and they were a literary family. She was the sister of P.L. Deshpande. World famous.
Oh, Pula Deshpande.
One of the finest, yeah.
Pula Deshpande,
Pula Deshpande, yeah. One of the finest humorists, in any language, forget Marathi. And that was early childhood. I have other memories. There's one, there was one which was, people were altogether more particular about details. And regardless of how sordid they may be, right? So my father used to practice and late into the night. So all his collections were in cash. So he would collect all the money. And in the morning, he would go and deposit it into the bank before he started the day's work. And that was, very close to the railway station, not very far from our house, Central Bank. And back in the day, Central Bank used to be full of Parsi people, lots of Parsis. And we had so there was one very interesting gentleman who was the manager, Parsi gentleman who was the manager. And he used to address everyone, call everyone darling.
Of course.
Yeah. So I used to just love that. I mean, I used to be scandalized also. And he called me and he would always have chocolate for me. I was like 3 or 4 years. I'll go with my dad and deposit the cash. And so my dad would go first in I think whatever time, 8:30 or 9 o'clock, whatever time the branch opened. My dad would be there. He would deposit his cash and then go away. So I tag along. And when we reach the branch, there is a little bit of a commotion. And it turns out that somebody has defecated in front of the entrance.
What the hell?
Yeah.
Someone has made a different kind of deposit.
Yeah, someone has made a
Well
different
played, well
kind
played.
of deposit.
Counter number 2.
Yeah.
Wow, quickly, wait, Naren, before you continue, Tony, get it all out.
That's what he did.
Get it all out.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh my God.
So everyone was there. And
Sorry, and if someone was to fall from stepping in that particular thing, it would be a different kind of deposit slip. Sorry.
So the Parsi gentleman, comes and he's the manager and the branch hasn't opened and he sees what's happening. He's furious. So first of all, he wants to involve the commissioner and the Supreme Court and everything. How can this happen in a law-abiding? So, all that happens. And then his employees are telling him, just pay someone to, clean it and be done with it. I mean, it's probably the work of someone. So somebody said, it's probably a kid. Some kid must have come and done it. So this guy goes, looks at it very closely, inspects the diameter of the turd.
Oh God.
Yeah. And he says in Parsi Gujarati, "Aa nallanu kaam nathi, motanu kaam che."
This is not the job of a small kid. This is the job of an adult man.
Yeah. So total Sherlock Holmes stuff. I remember I'm asking my dad, how does he know? So dad is
Nallanu kaam nathi.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And that, kids, is a metaphor for corporate takeovers today.
Did he end up finding the guy?
I don't know. I mean, he would have sized it also. He would have made everyone sort of
What I was hoping for, Naren, at the end of all this is how he'd work the word darling back into the conversation. I thought the punchline would involve that. Yes, even the best of stories, we need a break once in a while. So let's do that right now.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cyrus Says Cock and Bull, Cyrus, Naveen, Antriksh and myself talk about staff at Twitter panicking after Elon Musk's takeover and Rahul Gandhi partying at a Kathmandu nightclub. On the Filter Coffee podcast, Karthik talks to Hemant Soreng and Rajesh Nair, founders of Rustic Travel. It's an ice cream, you scream kind of day at Simblified. The hosts have a fun chat about all things ice cream. On All Things Policy, the Takshashila folk analyze 73 years of China's PLA Navy. And on the Life Manifesto, Zarina shares an important lesson about friendship with the story of Genghis Khan and his falcon. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're following this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Word of mouth is one of our biggest, most helpful things you could do for us. We'd really appreciate that. And also, don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you're listening on. And you can also check us out on YouTube. Go check out ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. You get a list of all of our YouTube channels there. We're also doing a small listener survey to better understand how you respond to our shows and the advertising on the network. We would really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it out. It's at ivmpodcast.com/survey. This really helps us build better shows for you. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors for this week, SBI Life Insurance, India Water Portal, and Jupiter, a digital banking app.
And now back to discussing the lovely city of Bombay with Naren and the rest of the Simplified gang. So the place where you stay right now, and we're not too far apart, was a very different place when you grew up and what it is right now. Right now, it's bustling. There's a metro being built. Gleefully for me, it's a microbrewery central of the city.
Seriously?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that? Yeah, I mean, pretty much everybody is between Oshiwara and Malad West. You have about 6 or 7 breweries that deliver.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty great. I mean, it's picking up. There are malls everywhere. And but it's also dusty, crowded and whatever. So how have you seen
So when I went to Manipal, some of my friends who came to visit me, Malad was pretty backward. And they, one of them said that it's the armpit of Bombay. And
they still say this about.
So, but now the armpit is like nicely waxed and satinelled and whatever perfumed. It's posh now. Yeah, it's the armpit, but it's nice.
It's a clean armpit.
Clean armpit.
I mean, it's not clean. Ironically, it's actually become dirtier. But anyway, we'll go with the analogy. Never mind. Yeah.
So there was a lot of marshy land near where I stay, and there was a place called Chincholi Bandar. Okay. And Chincholi Bandar was an actual port. Bandar means port, right? A little jetty where small vessels would come. And this was the smuggler central of at least that part of Bombay. Yeah. So people used to smuggle gold back in the day, thanks to visionary Prime Minister Morarji Desai, who decided to just ban gold altogether. And people had to smuggle gold. And the gold would come in those, bigger Arab dhows or whatever they called. But they couldn't come inland because they would be spotted. So these little fishing boats would go.
Wow.
And apparently it was called a jacket wala. So jacket wala means you go to the ship, they give you waistcoats with gold bars sewn inside them. You wear them and you wear your whatever garment on top of that, and you come back in the fishing boat and then you hand it. So that was how the smuggling was done. And every now and then someone would decide that, there's so much gold, 1 or 2 bars, if I take for myself,
nobody will realize.
And the smuggler would come for you. And so ever so often, there would be people killed, murder. So it was murder ho gaya. So someone would be stabbed to death or something, and cops would be. So it was a good kilometer from our house. And moment we heard, so someone would whisper, hey, murder ho gaya. And we would all go running to see. We had I must have been 10, 12 years old. I had no idea what a murder was. But everyone wanted to go and see. And one day actually...
And genuinely knowing Naren, a man who probably started reading P.G. Wodehouse in the womb, when he heard that a murder is there, he must have gone out expecting crows. Yeah, this is fascinating. I remember you telling me some other fact like this about some part of this northern Bombay being developed or something else because of some illegal trade or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was. I don't think it was a smuggler story. It was something else.
There's
something Vasai Creek. There's something about Vasai Creek. I remember.
The creek, the whole thing was... It was
where the Portuguese landed first or something like that, right?
That's something else. Yeah, that's another story that pertains to Vasai and all those parts. But Malad it had a network of creeks, a lot of little fishing boats, small canoe kind of things. And they would catch these little fish that, and sell them. And as kids, we used to play around there. And if you are lucky, the fisherman would give you a ride. Sometimes he'll charge you for it. He'll charge you 5 paisa, 10 paisa or something. Sometimes he'll just take it. And I went from Malad to Warsaw by boat once. Like the network of creeks, it opened out. And I remember being shocked by the ocean. I never seen the ocean till there. Till you reach the sea, it's very placid, right? It's almost like a river, absolutely. And when you go into the water, the whole little boat is just like goes up several feet and then comes crashing down. I was completely scared. And I think I must have started crying or something. And then that guy very, sort of considerate, and he told me nothing will happen. He pulled over to the nearest this thing and he deposited me, but unfortunately deposited me on the other side, which is Warsaw. And if you are to come back from Warsaw to Malad, you have to come all the way to Andheri and then catch a train. I had no clue. I must have been 8 or 10, 11, 12 years. And someone actually brought me home. Someone took me, brought me home. I got a bit of tongue lashing from my mom, who actually had no clue where the hell I was. She didn't even know I was missing. And she said, "Oh, you shouldn't do such things." Both my parents never used to shout at me or anything like that. It was but I remember my mom being a little upset. So you shouldn't run away from home like that. But it was quite an adventure. Yeah. Bombay was very innocent that way. It was very different.
Bombay or just this part of Bombay?
Must be this part of Bombay. I haven't had, we never used to go around much. We used to go around on foot a lot.
We gave auto rickshaws back in the day.
I don't remember. I don't, must have been there, but we used to have a tonga to go to school.
Oh, wow.
A Ghoda Gadi.
The country. That's a long ride.
Naren, but yet another fancy thing or different thing about Bombay was the octroi. And I remember your story about your friend who used to transfer things from
atomic research center story.
So I had
I don't think
friend-
this has ever made it to Simplified before.
Yeah, go for it, Naren.
So octroi was a very pernicious bloody law. Okay. So if you're caught taking any goods, the octroi sort of officer has arbitrary rights to charge you anything. So let us say you're carrying brand new music system, and you bought it somewhere, maybe bought in Pune, and you bring it. The octroi guy will stop you at the Cheknaka. He'll make you open it. He'll say, you're carrying this and you're evading octroi, and the penalty was 10 times the value of the octroi, which was a lot. And I mean, there's no appeal. And so you just have to bribe the guy. So, you open negotiation and then sort of pay them. And there was another tribe of people who used to regularly smuggle material this way and that. There's no problem taking it out of Bombay. So because a lot of industrial area in New Bombay, if you got anything manufactured in New Bombay, if you had to get it into Bombay, you had to pay the octroi on that, which is substantial. It was some 4 or 5%. But people would try to smuggle it and they would keep getting caught and you had to pay. So one of my friends, he got a job, a small assignment in BARC. So
which is Baba Atomic Research Center.
Baba, which is in Bombay, one near Bombay. Yeah. So they have one small experimental reactor. They need little things. There's something he was turning something called zirconium or something. So anyway, he got, because it's BARC, is exempt from octroi. So they gave him a certificate saying that, you can take it and go back and this is your... And he took that letter, that exemption letter, and used it for everything under the sun. Which is he merrily do. So ARC work was maybe 0.1% of his thing, but that letter, he used it as a... And, some of it was... you could be blind, deaf and dumb and still know that it's not BARC work. He used to turn gear blanks for automobile company. So they were actual gears. And I mean, where would BARC use gears, right? One day somebody caught him. So he has this vehicle laden with material, groaning under its weight, and this guy is going and the octroi guy stops him. And this guy, as usual, gives him the chitti, and this guy is like, the octroi guy is a smart guy. I mean, he's one of the senior guys. And he says, I don't believe it. Let me see what the material is. And this guy, they're automotive gears. He would get caught. So this guy uses his brain. So what he does is, he says, sir, this is the key to my trunk. If you don't mind, I'll just stand away. He goes there and he sort of puts his hand over his crotch and stands. Because Aab open kar lena. So this guy is, he's like, why are you going far away? So he says, it's radioactive material. So for some people, what happens, it stops working. So आप जाओ, आपको कुछ नहीं होगा. You go.
This is absolutely amazing. So the internet reliably tells me that BITE is an acronym for built-in test equipment. So you can very confidently say, Naren, your friend, his bark was worse than his bite.
Wow. Okay. Actually, this reminds me of one Malayalam joke. Basically, there's this guy who walks up and wants a packet of cigarettes, and he asks the shopkeeper for a cigarette packet. He gives it to him. And on it says smoking causes impotency. And he's like, I don't want this. Give me the cancer flavor.
And I can imagine it being so much funnier when it's said out in Malayalam.
But one point that, Naren, when you were talking about the earlier stuff about some guy, when they dropped you off on the Warsaw side and then you went home by yourself and all that stuff, just reminds me of so in my own childhood, I remember when I was very small and I used to go to my school, initially my mom used to send me with a cycle wala. And that cycle wala was just this grown man who used to ride kids to school. So I was riding alone with him.
Yeah.
And that was perfectly fine and normal. And I think that would be outrageous in this day and age, even if that guy was using any other vehicle, right? You sending your child alone with some other stranger. And I also remember I had an accident once in the street somewhere and with my bike and whatever. And this random Sardarji uncle just said, where is your house? And he took me home. And that wasn't the most surprising part of the story at all. That was just normal. And I think that aspect of, I mean, maybe it was, in your case, it was older Bombay. In my case, it was a smaller town that was slightly later. I think that aspect of depending on or just expecting the kindness of strangers, right?
Yeah.
It's just completely disappeared from like urban life in some way, right? So
I don't know. I don't think so, actually. I actually think that at least in a city like Bombay, that you will find pockets of kindness.
But the point is this, that was not an amazing thing. Like an uncle just dropped you home.
Fair enough. Yeah.
The fact that right now, if someone did that would be on Instagram and go viral for a day or two, right? Versus what was just considered to be, acha bhaiya mujhe bas chhod dena wahan pe, is just part of life.
Yeah.
Right. And that was not really something that, like, if you find a child on the street who has had an accident, you will drive them home. That is not something to be commended about. That's just something you do.
Yeah.
No, but in general, as someone who's come to Mumbai and like hated it for the first 2 years and now loves it and like wants my daughter to grow up here rather than any other city in India, I would say like Bombay is fairly different in that sense, and that sense alone, right? Because if you think about it, like the real estate prices are like 2 to 3x elsewhere. The quality of life also is fairly, not too great because of the small space we live in and all of that. But in general, the people are lovely. And I think that's continued to be the case in Bombay ever since, right? And like it's always taken in waves and waves of people who've made it home, as opposed to possibly any other city in India for that matter. So,
I mean, that's what Tony said is like beautiful and something that we've seen on so many documentaries about the city, right? Waves and waves of people coming and calling it home and all that. So what's your experience been, Naren? Like, as somebody who's like, come here at the age of whatever and now seen many
you
generations.
take these things for granted. You realize when you go somewhere else, what fear, especially women, right? They live in like, at least when I went to Delhi many years ago, and I, for one reason or the other, I really don't go to Delhi very often. But one thing that I've noticed whenever I go, people are very, very, very cagey about where they go at what time.
Yeah.
And women 10x more. So they really are. And Bombay, I come back late from wherever and I see women happily walking on the road and, it's just not, there is hardly any, I don't want to jinx it, but there's hardly any harassment of women on the street. So that's a great...
Or I think we should say it's like way less than other cities.
Yeah.
No, in fact, I don't know. No one's really had any major run-ins with that kind of thing.
There's always... that we know of. Off late
that we know of again. Yeah.
I mean, these cases have happened, but you're right. Yeah. I mean, what Tony said is correct, right? It is at least less, at least in reputation.
And I'd also make the caveat that this is probably true of the larger cities in India. Like of the larger cities in India, it's lesser because, again, I mean, there are narratives about maybe Ahmedabad before I left it. There are narratives about Nagpur. I've heard my friends say things about how safe they were and like general safety for women. I mean, Delhi has always had a crap reputation for it.
Yeah.
But I think there are a lot of places that can claim a lot of, like in Ahmedabad, the famous narrative about, even now, I mean, to be that matter, Navratri time is like a safe time for like teenage girls to roam around at 4 a.m. as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that aspect always remains. But the kindness of strangers in some way, I think Bombay really exemplifies that in a very, very big way for a large city and a city which is like absolutely strapped for resources and space. Like I still remember one aspect of this being where, I mean, also what really strikes me is Bombay's sense of humor to some extent, like the general sense of humor of the city. Like I still remember me getting onto, when I just moved to Bombay, I think Chuck and I used to live in Bandra. And I used to work at Fort. So I used to take a train from Churchgate till Bandra and getting on the train at Bandra, and the real crush used to come around Dadar, right? So like everyone's getting on the train and stuff. So, and I used to get on, of course, at rush hour. So getting on the train and I'm like, people have just like, the swarm has come in from this side and there are people pushing from both sides and stuff. And like, there's generally like, for one, from Dadar to Mahim, there's generally like people literally groaning and squeezing inside the train. And then some smart aleck in the middle says, guys, save some for the night also. He legit like screams it out. I just started laughing and I was like, in this environment where some dude is stuffed in someone's armpit, you can still get that
I know what you mean. It's almost like we are in this together, so let's laugh through the pain sort of thing. This is same, sounds like a weird comparison, but I feel like that sort of energy and collective collective experience is sort of like similar to a packed metal gig in some way, where you're sharing like an experience together.
Yeah, I mean, we are in a mosh pit after all, so might as well enjoy it here now.
Yeah, and even otherwise, right? Like one of my own lines that I like to keep repeating is Mumbai is one city where you have to step outside your house to get some privacy. Right? Because
wow, well said.
And like you can find people making out on Marine Drive at any point in time, whether it's the middle of the day, like at 12 noon or 3 in the afternoon, or 2 a.m. in the night. And that's beautiful, right? And no one like gives it a second thought, because everyone knows that you can't obviously like find privacy inside your house.
I would actually make that more a commentary on the lack of privacy in India in some way.
But that's amazing that you get that culture, right? Like,
but it's actually
Bangalore.
Yeah, because the one aspect of it which comes to me also is like, I still remember that. So I used to take this train from Bangalore to Ahmedabad when I was in college, and it was Ajmer Express. So it was actually a train that would go all the way from Mysore all the way till Jodhpur or something. And so people would obviously a whole bunch of people getting on it who are from Rajasthan and stuff. And a lot of Rajasthanis, I mean, back then, I don't know if it's still true, used to go to Bangalore and Mysore for their honeymoons. And
Bangalore-Mysore route.
That's a very famous place for going for your honeymoon and stuff. I used to be in this, even in the AC 3-tier or sleeper or something like that. You wake up in the middle of the night and there are people in the lower berths who are just going at it properly inside the train, in a crowded train. And I was initially disgusted by that. And later on, I was just discussing this with my friends and stuff. So one of those guys was a Rajasthani, and he actually told me that, I mean, these guys live in large families and in very small homes in some cases. So for them at home, privacy is a myth. And anywhere else inside the city or their town or their village, you can't go and get any privacy. So even husband and wife don't get privacy. So there is.
I have this Bombay joke about this thing. So it's severely PG. So dear listeners, please forgive.
And not the Wodehouse variety.
Except
there may be wood in it somewhere.
But no house.
Exactly.
So this guy who goes to his doctor and says that, I mean, we've been married for 10, 15 years. We have a few kids and everything. But, the sex life is not as exciting as it used to be. And, please, could you give me some medicine for it? So the doctor says, this is common, normal. You need some variety. You don't need any medicine. Would you try something else? So uska kya matlab? So he says, how do you do it? So he says, what? She sleeps below me. I sleep on top of her, and we do it. And he says, why don't you try some other position? This wo kya hota hai? So then he says, he explained 8 sketches and all. This was back in the day when there was no internet. And he says, why do you try dog style? So what is dog style? And he explained. And then he says, fine, this sounds very exciting. And then a few days later, he is back. He says, doctor, you have to suggest something else. So he says, what? It didn't work? No, it worked. It was nice and exciting. Then what's the problem? Well, the kids are laughing.
Holy crap.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Here's the thing. That joke could have ended in so many ways.
Yeah.
That last line made it Bombay. You didn't even need to say it.
And the other thing, when
no one saw this coming, but the kids did. So.
Wow. Superb.
Yeah.
Superb.
So this Bandra boys and trains, right? So actually Malad boys also. So me and one of my close friends in college used to live in Bandra. And we used to go to a common college, which is Andheri. And he used to come catch a bus. I used to go catch a bus. Train travel was not something So one day we decided to go and see a movie. So back in the day, English movies used to come, be shown only in a few theaters in South Bombay. So we catch a train, we go there and we go watch the movie. We come out and now we have forgotten where the damn station is. We found a way there. We don't. And Bandra boy I said, let's go ask someone. So it's beneath him to ask anyone. So, and he says, I know the place. And we go walking and somehow we land up at the High Court.
Whoa.
So when going, we had gone to VT station. So VT Station and High Court look pretty similar. They are like one of the Indo-Saracenic architecture kind of thing. But, one is a railway station and one is the High Court. But this guy is supremely confident. He says, boss, you don't worry, come with me.
Was he Supreme Courtly confident?
Yes. He walks in and I'm not seeing any trains. So he says, let's ask the ticket collector. And he goes and asks a lawyer. He's like, oh God. He says, boss, train kidhar hai?
Oh my. Wow.
What happened after?
So,
Don't leave it hanging.
Dirty. So we basically, we got a super dirty stare. And, we just escaped because before somebody gave us a habeas corpus and whatever writ of mandamus or whatever on our ass. And we just took off from there. And then some kindly soul pointed us in the general direction of the railway station. But yeah, Bandra boy went to High Court and asked a lawyer. He thought a lawyer was a TC and asked him whether train.
Fabulous.
Amazing.
And we are going to pause the conversation over there because, we ended up talking so much that we actually ended up talking for like 1 hour, 50 minutes or something. So we decided to release it over 2 episodes. And I hope you enjoyed this. This is like one of the, this was a very different sort of simplified episode. And more of this next week in your feeds. So this is me, Chuck, signing off. Thank you for listening.
Do you find yourself in a room full of people talking about investments and insurances and feel left out? Do you also want to understand how to spend your money wisely? Then you have come to the right place. Welcome to SBI Life Presents A Sip of Finance, a women-exclusive podcast where we break down difficult financial topics into simple and straightforward episodes with your host, Priyanka Acharya, a finance expert who's been in the industry for 14 plus years. And not just in English, but in 7 more languages. So tune in every Tuesday for fresh episodes on the IVM Podcast Network and all major podcast streaming platforms.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.